Good Monday afternoon to you. 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Hope you had a good weekend. The Browns did not have a good weekend. Chargers handled them pretty easily down on the lakefront, Huntington Bank Field. They now fall to 2-7. Tony Rizzo, longtime ESPN Cleveland sports personality, talking about what he saw in the Browns' loss to the Chargers.
The Browns weren't, I won't say out-coached. They were out-game planned tremendously. No one open. No one. Nobody open. It's as if they had our game plan. You don't think one Harbaugh helped the other Harbaugh, do you? Played Johnny last week. All of a sudden, Jimmy comes in here and lights us up. Not a coincidence. Not.
Well, let's welcome in Lance Reisland from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Lance, I'm sure, that goes on. I don't know if that's the reason, but yeah, the Browns offense, as good as it looked against the Ravens, looked that much of a struggle. Back to what it was before.
Well, the thing I like what Tony had to say there, but I don't necessarily agree, because here's why. I think that the Chargers did a really good job of being in that two shell. So they forced Jameis to come off his first read and get to his second, third progressions. Another thing that happens is they're unable to run the ball against a 5- and 6-man box. So they're able to get more guys into coverage. So you play zone coverage. You have a bunch of guys underneath that are able to cover. That had more influence than anything else, in my opinion. The ability, Jameis is really, really good right now when he gets one high hat and he gets man coverage, because then the read becomes automatic. What he's seeing right now, he's seeing zone coverage, which is forcing him to get to a second, third progression. And it's, again, no running game, right? So the no running game is what causes those second, third long situations that are very, very tough on an offense. So I don't think it necessarily had to do with knowing the scouting report. It has to do with they can't run the ball right now, and they're just it's a struggle when they can't run the ball at all.
Well, and you mentioned against light boxes. That's the concerning part of it. It wasn't like they were putting 8 men in the box. They were stopping, Nick Chubb with most of that offensive line there with lighter boxes.
Well, and Jameis likes to throw the ball deep. So what they did is they played that two shell and they made him keep everything underneath. Now, I think Jameis can do a really good job with that, but you saw his feet get a little bit antsy. There's a number of times in the pocket where he left the pocket and he didn't need to, and that's because his first and second progression were covered. And they're covered because generally he likes to work top to bottom. He likes to work those high lows. He likes to take shots. A couple of those interceptions were not, in my opinion, were not necessarily all his fault, but he has to continuously take what the defense gives him. And that's a hard thing for a gunslinger, right? If they want to push the ball downfield, they're not patient. Jameis Winston has 103 interceptions in his career because he's not patient. You get what you get with Jameis. You're going to get tons of yards, tons of touchdowns, tons of really good play, but he's going to make some interceptions. And those interceptions sometimes are touchdowns. So, it is what it is, but, you get what you get. I don't think anybody's shocked what they get out of Jameis Winston.
So DeJuan Jones got started at left tackle, was banged up some. Kevin Stefanski was asked about Jones at left tackle moving forward.
Yeah, I do plan on keeping him there. He's a young player that's going to continue to get better. It's not perfect. There's things he can get better at, but I do believe it's leaving him there and letting him develop there is the best thing.
Does that say anything about Jed? I mean, he was a former #1 pick for you guys.
I'm not trying to say anything about him. I'm just trying to put DeJuan out there and let him get better. Jed's still a player that we believe in, and right now he's got to be ready to go.
So that'll be interesting. Remember, Jedrick Wills did play right tackle at Alabama. They switched him over to left tackle when they drafted him 10th overall. You got Jack Conklin. Reports, pretty substantiated reports, are that his Gates Mills home is up for sale. So there's going to be changes on that offensive line without question.
Well, I've said it from day one. I really think, DeJuan Jones is perfect for that left tackle. Once again, though, that comes down to what they do at quarterback. You got to have a quarterback where you know where he sets. Now, DeJuan Jones, a couple things that I saw. Obviously, I love his ability to pass protect, but what you're going to get at that left tackle too also plays into his ability to move his feet, because you're going to get that wide 5. So if you see a couple of their decent runs, it's because you get that wide 5, because that left defensive end to the offense's left is usually the #1 pass rusher, the big money maker. So I think it helps him in the run game too, because he doesn't have to maul. He's not a mauler in the run game. He uses his body and his athleticism. So I think it's not only a good fit in pass protection, it's a good fit in run game. He's a big guy. He's athletic. I think he's a guy you got to give a shout out there. The offensive line has got to have some want-to and some nastiness. I don't care what the scheme is. They've lost their identity in being nasty up front.
So the other thing that happened yesterday, the defense gave up some big plays, and we'll get into the film breakdown of it next segment. But Rodney McLeod, the safety, talked about some of the communication issues on defense.
The second explosive touchdown that we gave up, where the miscommunication happened, just not everybody being on the same page. Somebody, obviously we had a check involved based on their formation, that was echoed. And then with the motion that took place, it then required us to kind of check out of now that call. So there were a few different communication layers involved in that. And, what happened was you didn't have all 11 on one accord. And, we know that when those things rise on the field, normally that doesn't result in positive plays on our side. And just understanding the time of the year, it being November, understanding the team that we were playing, they're very disciplined. And that's the way they're structured, and knowing that they aren't going to do things to beat themselves. They're going to capitalize on your mistakes. And, that was something that, again, they didn't earn and we gave away.
Yeah, and that in a nutshell is what, swung that game. There were like 4 or 5 plays. You take them away, and that one comes down to the end. Can't take them away. And the Chargers made all of those plays.
Yeah, you're right. They played really good defense if you take those 5 plays away, but those five plays count. And the thing that I saw, first and foremost, as an offensive guy, you see what motion does. So motion causes conflict in a defense. Motion causes conflict in a secondary. So it seems like they were in a zone. They had a check. That second one, he's rolling to the middle of the field, tells me the corner should have bailed to cover 3, which means each corner and the safety each have a third of the field. That check was not, whatever it is, the communication didn't happen. And that happens in football. And there's kind of the downfall of playing zone, right? If it's man, it's a little bit easier to bump man. When you're in zone and you have particular calls against formations, that's what teams will do. Teams will motion and get to what they make you make decisions and make you make adjustments. So, again, communication was an issue. The first one I felt was a cover 2 shell, and Thornhill got caught inside. Second one was, I believe that Ward should have been third. And I don't place blame on anybody except for the communication. And they're going to have to get that ironed out in practice. Similar things are happening, and they have to get fixed quickly.
All right, so this from CBS Sports Week 9 grades for every team. For the Browns, they get a D. In a span of 7 days, Browns got the full Jameis Winston experience. After dicing up the Ravens last week, the bad Winston showed up against Chargers through 3 interceptions, which all came in the second half. Got 0 help from his offensive line on the day when he was sacked 6 times. Whatever spark the Browns got from Jameis Winston last week is now long gone. And on a bye week, it is not a great game to go into a bye with because they didn't play well.
Well, I stand in my minority here when I say that it wasn't all Watson. I know you and I talked about the last few weeks when getting rid of Watson was everybody's answer. And this team's struggles are a lot deeper than that. They struggle at receiver, even though Tillman's progressed. Offensive line has been a struggle both in scheme and their rules and fundamentals and responsibilities. The run game has been just horrendous. Obviously, injuries have been a part of that. The defense hasn't played to their part. The special teams have also not played to their part. So there's a lot that goes into it. I never thought it was all Watson, just like I don't think it was all Jameis. And a quarterback always gets too much blame, always too much credit. But this is much deeper than Watson replacing Watson. And I think people now see that. They have some issues with personnel, depth, and talent.
All right, so this from Doug Poundaley. 3 losers and a winner from the Browns' loss to the Chargers. Loser, Jameis Winston. Indecisiveness, inaccuracy, balls with no gas on them led to a ton of missed opportunities for the Browns. Loser, Browns' entire secondary. Secondary blew 2 huge coverages that led to 2 TDs from Herbert and the Chargers with no turnovers. Secondary was unable to help the Browns capitalize on momentum in the game. Loser, Nick Chubb. So far, since his return from action, Chubb has only averaged 2.7 yards a carry. He's unable to do much with small holes the offensive line has been providing for him. Winner, Myles Garrett. After going without a sack for 4 straight games, he recorded the hat trick against Herbert and the Chargers offensive line in Week 9. There, again, kind of goes back to what we were saying before. The problems aren't all Winston. They weren't all Watson. It's the offensive line. It's the running game. It's the wide receivers. It's just a mess offensively.
Well, I'm going to clap back a little bit on the Nick Chubb, right? So Nick Chubb is working his way back. Nick Chubb is getting hit at the line of scrimmage right now. So at 2.7 is all him. I think he's averaging under 0.5 before he gets touched. I heard that today on the radio. So really, and obviously he does not have the explosion. You see, the vision's there, the lateral movements there, all that stuff with the ACL. He just doesn't have the explosion when he makes that cut. That will come with time. It's panic mode. Everybody gets into the point where everybody wants to fire sale and get rid of everybody and fire everybody. You can't fire everybody. You got to kind of figure it out and retool. And obviously there are some issues they need to fix. It's been a terrible year, but I don't think firing everybody and placing blame. You just got to go back to work and you got to figure it out. And obviously I agree with the secondary. I don't think Jameis played well, but a lot of it has to do with the defense and their lack of a running game. Myles Garrett is doing what Myles Garrett does, and that's kind of what it is. But they've had so many big play issues giving up on defense. That's hurt them as well.
Yeah, and again, relative to Nick Chubb, I guess the only thing that surprises me is normally with light boxes, I would expect him to eat them up. But to your point, the explosion would be the reason that he is able to eat them up. Lance Reisland and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout, other side of the break. Film breakdown video analysis, 3 reasons the Chargers were so successful against the Browns. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
You know what I think? I don't think you have the stones.
Oh, I've got the stones. I think you're the one that don't have the stones.
Let's settle this once and for all.
Amble up to the 4 new Ohio Lottery scratch-offs with all kinds of stones. Gemstones, diamond, emerald, sapphire, and ruby 10s. $10 each. 10 times multipliers. 2 fast spots for quick draw wins of up to $100 and a $500,000 grand prize. Which one will you get when you order them up? Well, that's just the luck of the draw.
We continue talking Browns with Lance Reisland from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Lance, some 3 reasons, film breakdown video analysis, 3 reasons Chargers were so successful against the Browns. Number 1 on your list, Chargers used the Browns' aggressiveness and lack of communication to exploit the defense. Take us through this and what you see here.
The Browns linebackers, they bite up on the play action. That's because they're inexperienced and just haven't been around. They're super aggressive. That left the second level open. Then you're going to see a pin and pull. Diabate tries to take underneath, and Bush runs himself out of the play. And then you're going to see the miscommunication where Denzel Ward thinks it's cover 2, and Thornhill rolls over to cover 3, and they leave a wide open guy. And as you watch these plays, it kind of, the aggressiveness is okay, right? You're getting guys downhill, and again, it comes back to injury. These guys aren't in there. Not that they can't be great players, but they're not the starters, and they're not the starters for a reason. Linebackers really struggle with their gap integrity at times during the game, making sure that they're covering what they're supposed to cover. And then obviously the lack of communication in the secondary. If you make a mistake in the secondary at any level, it's a touchdown. It's not like any other position. You got to be good on every single snap. If you have, like you said, if you have 1 or 2 bad snaps, which they really didn't play too poorly, they had 2 really awful plays, but it cost them 14 points. So again, Chargers were very well versed, very well coached with Harbaugh. They took advantage of their aggressiveness, which is going to happen. That's okay. But the miscommunication is something that's kind of inexcusable and something the Browns got to fix.
Yeah, and those 2 touchdowns early kind of set the game in the favor of the Chargers and enabled them to kind of play from ahead. All right, number 2, second reason that the Chargers are so successful against Browns, this one relative to the defense. Zone coverage of the Chargers took Winston off his first read. You kind of alluded to that earlier. Take us through what you see here.
You're going to see right here, this is obviously he's going to drop back here. The pocket's fine, but he panics. And the reason he panics is because in his first game back, he had what he wanted. Now the bottom here, you're going to see the corner. They're on cover 2. The corner's going to bail, and you're going to see the tailback come wide open. That's actually the corner that takes it to the safety. Going back here, you're going to see as he drops here, they take away, they're in a zone coverage, and they take away his first read. And for some reason, he panics, and he gets a sack. This next one, you're going to see the bottom of the screen. You're going to see the tailback come wide open because the corner's trying to play both the 7 route and the flat route, which is a smash combination. Now, that's understanding that Jameis Winston does not like to take the checkdowns. He likes to take the home runs and score touchdowns. And you're going to see at the bottom of the screen, you're going to see the tailback forward come wide open if he just checks it down to him. So, again, taking away, playing zone, taking away the vertical, taking away the home run shot from Jameis. These are things he'll improve on. He hasn't played a lot. He got a man coverage last week with the Ravens, which allowed him to make a quick read and get rid of the football. Jameis likes to play on rhythm and on schedule. And when he has to pump, you see, kind of goes back to the Baker days. He likes to be on rhythm, likes to be on schedule. When he's not, his footwork gets out of control, and he's a little bit off.
Yeah, and we saw that a couple of times where he kind of pumped once and then kind of reloaded and threw the football. We saw that more than once, actually. All right, number 3 reasons the Chargers so successful against the Browns. Special teams were not a wash. So take us through what you see here with special teams.
Well, obviously, you're going to, first and foremost, you're going to get the punt return. Anytime you get a punt return or kick return, you're talking lanes. People aren't in their lanes, and people are getting walled off. And you got to make sure that you stay with your responsibility, inside and in front. So you never cross a guy inside of you. Everybody's got to squeeze down. Then you're getting blocked field goal here. And obviously, I think this field goal, in my opinion, was a little bit low. But there's a little bit of pressure. And there's been issues, whether it's protection, low kicks, kick returns, kick coverage, whatever it may be. Special teams at every level, and I learned this from my dad, should be a wash, meaning you shouldn't talk about it very much in the post game or the next day when you watch film. Both teams should just kind of be a wash, and obviously the Browns there's 3 phases, and the Browns are losing on offense and they're losing on special teams most weeks, and they're still which takes away from their solid defense. So they've got to iron out and make the special teams be a wash or win each week, or they're going to continue to lose.
Yeah, and we keep saying this, Lance, and I don't know any other way to say it. The things that they are doing are what causes a football team to be bad. They're doing things that bad football teams do.
Absolutely, and bad football teams are something in terms of what Kevin Stefanski does. Everybody has struggled with schemes and things like that, but what's made Kevin Stefanski, in my opinion, so successful is his ability to run a proper organization. They're usually doing the right things, and the easiest way to look at it is that a good football team, whether they're winning every game or in every game, is they control the controllables, right? They control what they can control. You can't control guys making great plays on the other team, but you can control offsides. You can't control special teams. There's certain things that you can control that they're not doing right now that Stefanski's teams have done in the past. And that's kind of alarming coming off the success they had last year.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, do you just go back and retool the entire offensive staff and go back to what Kevin Stefanski knows and did, under center, play action, and because the motion and the things they've tried to, it's not working. And I don't know, I mean, it's been so bad, I don't know that I would try to stick with it. And I was a guy that's, let's see what they can do with that.
Well, I've said this to you a bunch. I'm a firm believer, and I'm very, very biased because, I'm just a former high school offensive coordinator, but calling plays for 23 years, the thing that you always try to do is you always try to improve. But you got to remember, you only know what you know. And more importantly, you only can fix what you know. So all of us can run all kinds of schemes, and I've looked at every offensive scheme over 25 years, from, the air raid to option, you name it. We've all looked at them all and all tried them all, but you really only know what you know. Again, more importantly, what you can fix. So I wouldn't be surprised with jobs on the line if Kevin goes back to what he knows, which is under center, boot, waggle, weak side zone, counter, the counter, the waggle off the counter, and physical football. Because for me, it's not the scheme right now; it's the mentality right now. They're not very tough up front like they've been.
Lance Reisland and I can step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. We'll be right back.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE with Lance Reisland from the Plain Dealer at cleveland.com. So this is one of those analytics type graphs, offensive drive efficiency chart. X-axis, so across, is the drives to reach the red zone. Y-axis, percentage of red zone trips that score a touchdown. So the X-axis is the percentage of drives to reach the red zone. The Browns are by far the worst team in football in drives that reach the red zone. They're behind the Chargers, the Seahawks, the Raiders, the Panthers, and the Bears. You see way over on the other side, you got the 49ers, the Bills, the Commanders, and the Ravens. So those are all playoff teams that are considered. And then there's the Chiefs and the Lions. Those are the furthest 6, 7 there. Those are all Super Bowl contenders, and the Browns are on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. So, Lance, when you look at that, it shows you how much of a struggle it's been. They're not even moving the football, is what that's telling you. They are not getting into the area where they are threatening to score consistently.
Well, I will say this. If you're not able to run the ball at all, even if you're a spread team, if you watch the Rams and some of these teams over the weekend that predominantly want to throw the football, you got to be able to run the ball occasionally. You got to be able to have some quality runs. So maybe not quantity. Maybe you don't rush, 25, 30, 40 times like they used to because they're trying this new style offense. But you got to have some quality runs on first down. And that's what I see happening is that there's too many second and third and long situations. And they're not pass protecting well enough to be in those automatic pass situations because it allows those defensive ends to just pin their ears back and come, and you get these exotic blitz looks from these really good defensive coordinators. So for me, the number one reason besides the quarterback, which everybody has blamed everything on the quarterback, which I don't agree with, really comes down to the run game. My reason they've struggled so bad this year on offense starts and ends with that run game. They got to get the run game going so they can get some advantages on second, third down.
And I think you touched on it. I've said it before. They're not physical on the line of scrimmage offensively anymore. Defensively, they're still playing a little physical. They used to manhandle teams up front. It's the same guys, and they're not doing that. The question is, have you switched the scheme up significantly? Is it being coached differently? Is it different techniques? I mean, let's hope it's, the technique and you can go back and just say, all right, this isn't working. We're going to go back and we're going to be physical.
Well, for me, that comes down to practice habits, right? So right now they're not practicing being physical every day. And to be a physical run football team, you have to physically run the football in practice, and you got to have some live bullets. Browns don't practice like that now. Browns aren't physical in practice. They never have been. Now, they've been successful, and everything's under a microscope when you're losing. But really, if you're going to be a physical football team up front, you got to run the ball. You also got to involve some gap schemes, right? They're all zone right now. They're not pulling those guards. Gap schemes allows you to be, as an offensive lineman, get off the ball, get inside, and just kind of maul people. And they're not doing that right now because of the scheme. Everything is zone, and you have to be really cognitive in zone and 2 hands with 2 feet and 2 defenders. And there's a lot that goes into zone. Really, really awesome if you can run it. Gap is a little simpler. Gap is a little archaic, which is awesome because you can get those guys, put their hands in the ground and get off the football. They're not doing that at all right now. There is no movement whatsoever. I always like to say vertical displacement. There is no movement up front. With no movement, you get no run game.
All right. This is also interesting. Last week, Browns offense exploded against the Ravens. 13 play-action passes on 43 dropbacks, 30%. 8 completions, 147, and a touchdown. They only ran 5 play-action passes on 56 dropbacks this week, 9%, 3 completions, 25 yards. Is it as simple as you don't do that with the type of scheme they were playing against, or is it a game planning thing? That wasn't part of the game plan.
Well, play action passes are always different, right? So usually you run a play action pass. First thing you always do is you run it off your best run play. A lot of us will run a play action pass off the best run play that we did the week before, your best scheme in general as an offense. You know, the Browns used to, if you think about the wide zone with the boot coming off it, that starts with you got to be able to run the ball. If you don't run the ball, then they're not doing it. Secondly, the defense wasn't a big play action defense. They weren't biting up on stuff. They were bringing 4 and dropping 7. So it wasn't like they weren't trying to stop the run per se. So that's part of the issue too. So there's a lot that goes into play action passes. And once again, it starts with the run game. And with no run game, you don't have to bring extra people down in the box and step up and create those windows behind the linebackers because the defensive line can handle it. So right now, unless they run the ball, there's no play action game that's going to be successful anyway.
Yeah, to your point, there's no threat of running the football even, so that's why they're not honoring the play action. All right, this from the Bleacher Report. Every team's biggest needs ahead of the trade deadline. For the Browns, number 1, quarterback. Number 2, wide receiver. 3, they say left tackle. Linebacker. 4, interior defender. 5, add now, draft picks. Conklin and Elijah Moore would be potential trade chips. Teams are desperate for offensive line help right now. Moore is in the final year of his contract, hasn't made the kind of impact that would demand another contract. I can't argue with quarterback and wide receiver. Left tackle, not as much. If DeJuan Jones can make the transition, there's somebody there that has shown some success, although he's not playing well this year. Again, there's Jerry Jeudy may be the guy, but they don't have anybody that threatens the defense. That's I look at it and who's the guy that threatens the defense right now? Njoku, maybe?
I think you just said it best, right? They have if you asked me if somebody said to me, who would you draft? Well, I'm going to take a look, and I started on my draft stuff already. I got to find a guy who can get me easy yards, right? And you and I have talked about that a bunch. The Browns don't have anybody that can get them easy yards right now, and the scheme's not matching that as well. So Tillman's been great, but Tillman's an outside receiver, curls, hitches. They need a guy that they can throw the ball to, not block anybody, and he gets you a big play once in a while. That's what they don't have. Everything has to be, for the last couple of years, everything has to be so perfect on offense because they don't have any guys that can take the top off or just break a big run or break a tackle or get open or make people miss. They don't have anybody who's sudden or twitchy. They need to find a guy in the draft early on who can make plays without everything being blocked perfectly.
Yeah, and to that point, again, we've kind of been on and off with looking at this. We're going to look at it again this week. The 2025 NFL Draft, if it were held today, Patriots would have the first pick. They have a quarterback. Jaguars, second pick, they have a quarterback. Saints need one. Panthers, they probably need one. And the Browns draft 5th ahead of the Raiders, Giants, Dolphins, and Titans. So look at all of the teams with just 2 wins. There are 9 of them currently. That's an opportunity lost. But the point there, the Browns may not have their pick of the quarterbacks. And if you don't have your pick of the quarterbacks, you better go with the guy you have the highest rated, or you need a wide receiver. So I don't know that I'd be locked into quarterback if I'm picking 5, 6, 7, 8, something like that.
Well, this is going to be interesting. I was asked this earlier today. I think this is going to be fascinating moving forward. So if Kevin's going to take back the offense and they're going to do what they want, they can get a guy like Garrett Nussmeier from LSU. He's my absolute favorite pocket guy coming out of the draft. He can make all the throws. He's got a lot of moxie to him. He plays with a ton of confidence. He comes from a Brian Kelly offense, which means he's going to be underneath center. He's going to run more of a pro style. I absolutely love him on film. He's a guy you probably get a little bit later in the first round, second round. I've not done all my breakdowns yet, but I have on him, and I love him. And I say that because not a lot of people are as high on Nussmeier as I am. The other guy I really like is Cam Ward, and I think you'd have to take him because I think he'll be a guy that's early off the board. But there's a ton of receivers. The Browns got to take some guys that they, now that they got these first round picks, they got to get a guy who's an impact guy, easy yard guy. And I'm with you. I think that's I don't know if it's a back or receiver. It's got to be a space guy, I like to call him, a guy you get the ball in space and he makes plays. But it'll be interesting quarterbacks, why? Because Cam Ward is more like Deshaun Watson, where Nussmeier is more like Flacco, and Jameis Winston with a really, really high upside. So it'll be interesting to see what they do moving forward.
Yeah, and again, those are all decisions they've got to make. And the other thing, it'll be interesting. Do they view it as a quick retool, or do they view it as a couple-year rebuild? And I think we'll get some of those answers based on who they may trade away. Trade deadline comes up tomorrow at 4. Lance Reisland and I can step aside, take one more time out. We'll talk a little bit about that trade deadline and the future for the Browns. Sports4CLE, be right back. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Lance Reisland from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. Tony Grossi, longtime Browns beat reporter, talks about how to fix the Browns. This is from ESPN Cleveland.
What do you think their plan is to get out of this hole?
How to fix it? I would think drafting a quarterback now it's got to be top priority.
Paramount. You don't think it'll be DTR? You don't.
No,
think
but I heard you talking. I agree with you. He's not a future starter, but you need to
gotta see him.
Yeah,
gotta see him.
You need to see him.
Let him play 4 weeks in a row. Who knows?
Planned, instead of just throwing him out there and surprising him like they have 2 or 3 times.
Sure, I guess I'd be interested in seeing that, Tony. But I said to Riz, I don't think he can stay healthy.
Well, yeah, let's see, play him.
Lance, and I get DTR's played well in preseason. You don't often take a quarterback in the 5th round and expect him to develop into a starter. You expect him to develop into a NFL caliber quarterback who, if you need him to play a couple of games, can lead you to wins. That's the whole purpose when you draft somebody in the 5th round.
Well, I think it speaks more. They got to make a decision which route they're going on offense before they decide on their quarterback, right? So, if you're gonna be a pocket type offense, Jameis Winston, Joe Flacco, Kevin Stefanski, or are you going to be a spread offense where you're more finesse? You want the quarterback to be off-platform, Cam Ward kind of guy who's just an outstanding talent who can make all the throws. You have to decide what you're doing on offense first, because if you don't have the right scheme for the right quarterback, you see what happens. And the Browns are classic. I don't care what anybody says. I watched every throw from 2020, and I think Deshaun Watson has had some physical things that have happened to him, and obviously some off-the-field stuff. But Deshaun Watson was a really good pickup when it happened. He was an outstanding top 5 guy, and they just haven't been able to make it work. That's where it starts for me. What is your scheme going to be, and where are you going to go offensively? Then you build from there. And I think they got to improve their offensive line. They're going to have to figure out what Nick Chubb is going to be. The quarterback is involved in that. But once again, this is much bigger than the quarterback. The quarterback is the foundation. I understand that, and I agree with that. But they have to figure out which direction they're going with their scheme, because the scheme will tell you who they're going to draft, or the scheme will tell you who they think can be their guy.
All right, so this is 3 moments that tanked the Browns' rebuild since they tore everything down in 2016. Number 1, took Baker Mayfield over Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson in that draft. Number 2, they let Baker talk his way into playing through a torn labrum in 2021. Number 3, they traded for Deshaun Watson in 2022. Footnote, they mention Andrew Berry was there for all 3 of those. Now, Andrew Berry did not take Baker Mayfield, though. That was John Dorsey. So I digress. You got to get the quarterback right. They've been chasing that since '99.
Well, that's exactly right. I'm going to give Mary Kay some credit. Mary Kay absolutely loved Josh Allen coming out of college, and I hope she always lets me know. And I agree. You got to get that quarterback right. I'll be really honest with you. I was a huge Baker fan coming out of college. He was the best player in a big-time conference at a big-time school. He can make all the throws. You can see that now. He can make all the throws. Again, and I think the Browns maybe, the dysfunction with the Browns, it really kind of emphasizes at the quarterback position sometimes. And I think Baker was a great choice. I liked Lamar Jackson. I like Josh Allen. I like Josh Allen because he played at Wyoming and he was going to play in cold weather and he had big hands. But I really liked the pick of Baker Mayfield in that draft. I thought he had a great upside, and I thought he brought the mentality. In fact, I think he fits Kevin Stefanski's offense perfectly, which is always, that's for another podcast. But he's they got to find that guy, and they just haven't been able to do that yet.
Yeah, and again, until they get it right, they're going to continue to struggle. This is interesting. Darryl Ryder, Browns beat reporter, tweeted this out. Paul D. Podesta's strategies have produced the following on-field results for the Browns. 2016 and 17 rebuild, 1-31. 2018 and 2019, 13-18 and 1. 20 to 24, 39 and 27, 2 playoff seasons, 1 playoff win. Post rebuild, 52, 55 and 1. Overall, 53, 86 and 1. And again, the whole analytics thing, there are people on both sides of it. It's not working. Nobody signs up for 30 games below 500.
Well, I'm going to use the Steelers as an example, right? So Steelers were not supposed to be very good this year, right? They had 2 quarterbacks that were both just going to be okay. But when you talk about culture, I think the word culture sometimes is overused in the word sports. It's the most important thing, but it's overused. Culture comes with consistently doing the same things, right? Consistently, habits build culture. Doing it consistently right all the time. And that's what the Steelers do. The Steelers draft really well. When you look at a guy like Peyton Willis, when you look at the tight end they draft, when you look at the offensive lineman they draft, they're not always the highest guy on the board, but they're football players. And that's kind of the Steelers' MO. When the Ravens draft defensive players, they're nasty. They fly the ball, they hit. So these guys, these programs, these organizations that have consistency, they do it their way, and they have a culture that they've implemented, and they draft that way. It's amazing how some of these teams don't rebuild. They just retool. And in the NFL, you shouldn't rebuild. You should retool because you should have good players at every level. The Browns have really got to figure out their drafting, who they're drafting, and why they're drafting, and make sure they get some of those first-rounders right, because that's what it really comes down to. They haven't hit on many of their draft picks.
Yeah, you have to admit now that Jedrick Wills at 10th overall was a miss. They haven't had a first-round pick in a while. The second-round picks, JOK was really good. Delpit was pretty good. So those are not bad. But the third-round picks now, they've been not great. Anthony Schwartz comes to mind. You had Jordan Elliott. So there are not a lot of draft picks that you can go with. The other thing I would say, look at the Ravens. The Ravens, Ozzie Newsome kind of got that started. Now he's moved on, and they've continued to be able to identify players that fit their system. The Steelers have had 3 head coaches going back to Chuck Noll in like the 60s. So, I mean, that's stability. Think of how many, everybody here wants to change the head coach and the GM again. And again, I get it. It's been a disappointing season. I don't know if starting over is the best thing.
Well, when you start over, you have to usually you have to understand there's going to be pitfalls and there's going to be things that happen. You're going to have your lumps and you're going to take those lumps. And Ravens are another great example. Teams that draft to what they do. Like I said with the Steelers, there's just so many things that the Browns need to figure out. And I'm going to use Jed Wills as an example. I've watched Jed Wills personally practice for 3 years now. I've been down there a half hour every single day for 2 days. And the thing that I understand why they draft Jed Wills has a ton of talent. He can move his feet. So when you go to like the analytical, all the measurements, Jed Wills has all the measurements. The one thing that Jed Wills has not shown is that that nastiness. And when he gets that, he's going to be, he could be a scary player.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, before I let you go, this is kind of interesting. So trade deadline's tomorrow at 4 o'clock. And then a lot of names keep coming up relative to the Browns. This from Brad Stainbrook tweeting out. Expect teams to call on players like David Njoku, Greg Newsome, and Elijah Moore before Tuesday. at 4 o'clock. That's the trade deadline. Browns are already getting calls on Zadarius Smith. So the word is Zadarius Smith. The Lions are interested. It's looking like it might be a 4th-round pick. If they don't get what they want, I wouldn't trade Zadarius Smith. He is under contract for next year. It'll be interesting to see. If they think it's a multi-year rebuild, Zadarius Smith probably gets dealt. If it's a pivot and they expect to contend, they may keep him. I would be very hesitant to trade Njoku. Newsome I might listen to just because the one position they seem to be able to identify pretty well are defensive backs relative to the draft.
Well, yeah, so I'm a big fan of David Njoku, and I'm a big fan because before Stefanski got here, if you remember, he was a blocking tight end for a couple years. He comes out of Miami. He's a super talent. He's got all this, and he didn't say anything about it. He wanted to get traded, and if you remember that little spat he had, and then he just kind of put his head down and went to work and was a blocking tight end and did everything they asked of him. In the last 2 years, him and Amari Cooper have been, and Nick Chubb have been their best players. And if you're going to have you win with players. David Njoku is your best player right now on offense. With Chubb coming back from injury and the receivers and trading Amari Cooper, David Njoku is your best weapon. So if you are trading David Njoku, you are starting completely over. And I don't know if that's the way to go. Njoku's a really good talent, seems to be a really good clubhouse guy, a guy who sacrificed his own stats to do the right thing a couple years ago, got the big contract. The other guys I can see, obviously there's got to be some change. Some people want some heads to roll, but I would stick with Njoku. I think he's a great talent.
Lance Reisland, is always great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Lance.
As always, thanks for having me.
Lance Reisland, make sure you check him out, cleveland.com. Really good stuff. Check out his film breakdowns, again, cleveland.com, as well as the pages of the Plain Dealer. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Xavier, Crocker, Chef Zay, straight ahead. We head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE. Be right back.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
You know what I think? I don't think you have the stones.
Oh, I've got the stones. I think you're the one that don't have the stones.
Let's settle this once and for all.
Amble up to the 4 new Ohio Lottery scratch-offs with all kinds of stones. Gemstones, diamond, emerald, sapphire, and ruby 10s, $10 each. 10 times multipliers, 2 fast spots for quick draw wins of up to $100 and a $500,000 grand prize. Which one will you get when you order them up? Well, that's just the luck of the draw.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams, I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Okay, guys, after watching that mess, I've come to the final conclusion. I think it's time to just blow this thing right up. Get a real GM in there who's going to quit looking at stats and draft guys by talent so we can get better with our players. And as far as our coach, you know how I feel about him. Does he even look at films? Do they even come up with game plans to stop, to score, or do anything against that defense? There's no life on the team anymore. And I'm sorry. We have to go a different direction, and we've got to get rid of these two schmoes and start to go all over again and get a new momentum on this team. Boy, oh boy, what a disaster.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's check in with Xavier Crocker, Chef Zay, the CrocPot podcast, as well as a writer for CrocPotCLE.com. Chef Zay, where are you at on that? I keep going back and forth. I look at it, and I think Stefanski and Barry have done some good things. When they got the extension, my thing is they're now tasked from taking Browns to mediocre to consistent playoff team. They took a step back in that first year. Obviously having a little bit of trouble with Chef Zay and the audio, so we'll work on that. But again, I have poo-pooed the idea of moving on from both Stefanski and Barry, and now I'll at least listen to it. What are you thinking, Chef Zay? I'm sure you heard that.
Are we good now?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Yeah, I look at this as just a big puppet show right now. I thought we had the right guys in place that could, handle the show that is Jimmy Haslam in this organization with Andrew Barry and Kevin Stefanski, but clearly it's not the right thing. So I don't know how it went from 11-6 to 8-1 at home to 1-4 at home, and now all of a sudden we're talking about trading David Njoku, and Myles Garrett's been thrown around in trade talks, and all of these names that should not be in trade talks. It's not like we have to blow this whole operation up, but when you don't have an improvement, I talked about this at the end of last year and before the playoff game in Houston, I posed the question: if we lose this playoff game, is it a failed season, and what do you do moving forward with Kevin Stefanski? I think it was the wrong time to jump the gun and give him an extension, despite the fact that he's a two-time head coach of the year. And here we are 9 weeks in, and we're seeing what it was the wrong decision right now, because they're more than likely going to blow it up, and we're going to be the butt of all jokes again, saying, oh, Cleveland, typical thing, firing their coach. So I don't know what they do moving forward, but they better figure it out fast.
So the one thing I would say, who was the one, whose idea was it to, and I supported this idea, so whose idea was it to retool the offense around Deshaun Watson's skill set? Whoever's idea that was, that's where I blame this in going sideways. And I was for doing it, but man, that's been a disaster, an absolute disaster.
I look at it through this lens. It's so tough because it has been a disaster, right, Brian? But how many times have, in your lifetime and in my lifetime, us as Browns fans had an opportunity where we were like, oh my goodness, we have a chance to go get a top 5, top 3 talent at a quarterback position, let alone a receiver. Like, we never are in those conversations. So I think it was the right thought process. They were going out at the time. I know hindsight's 2020. We know what Deshaun Watson is now. But at the time, there were 13 other teams and 4 of them willing to fork up the money that the Browns were willing to fork up to kind of do the same thing, because they knew that he was an exceptional talent at the time. So it's kind of that situation where it's like, man, I can't fault them, but at the same time, someone has to pay because it's been such a bad trade. We got to keep it real.
I'm not even looking at the trade. I mean, in the off season, was it Stefanski's idea to get rid of Van Pelt and bring in this? Because the biggest problem has been the offensive line is now, I don't want to say they're soft, but they're not physical.
Well, you know who's hiring that was? That's Kevin Stefanski's hiring to go get Andy Dickerson. There was no problems with that when you had Callahan in the fold. So, if Kevin Stefanski wasn't calling the plays, the other power that I think he has is making the hires and who he wants as his, coaches and assistants. Staley and Dorsey and Dickerson. Those are all his signings. So that falls under the Kevin Stefanski blame, if you ask me.
Yeah, the only thing I don't know was he told by ownership or analytics, so Paul DePodesta, man, we got to maximize Deshaun Watson. We got to change this offense to maximize Deshaun Watson's skill set. That was the critical error that was made, and I was all for it. People who watch this, I thought it was a great idea. Hadn't worked. Not going to work.
Well, Well, I mean, I guess when you invest in $230 million, you're going to do everything you can to try to get the most out of that talent. And, like you said, I was for it too. I mean, you didn't see what you wanted to see the first couple years with Deshaun. You make this complete switch with the offense and you think you're going to retool and do all these different things. But at the end of the day, none of that matters if the players aren't going to go out there and execute what's in front of you. And as much as I didn't want to go down the route that the players didn't maybe want to play for Ford, we saw a complete night-day shift in 1 week with Jameis Winston, and then you've seen it again. So it's just like there's something deep internally in the organization that's eating them away, and it's not a talent issue. That's my big thing. How are we this bad and it's not a talent issue? It's a culture issue.
So take a look at this. This is I found this one shocking, and this is the Browns defense, which has played pretty well. They have 1 interception in 9 games. There's way too much talent on that side of the football and way too much money being spent for them to have 1 interception.
Last year, we were on the end of all of the fortunate things, and this year, we haven't secured any turnovers that much. I mean, our 1 interception came from David Njoku, and he has a broke hand with a cast on. That should not be the story, and that should not be the case. That's not what this team has been built on. I know that's not what Jim Schwartz and them preach in the locker room. They're trying to create turnovers, but I think it kind of goes hand in hand with the offense. And, it's hard enough when you're going out there and you're playing against some of the top talent, but when your offense isn't giving you any opportunities to get a breather or for you to play that free style where you can create these turnovers, it's going to be tough sledding for the defense. So obviously that's a big reason why we aren't where we want to be, but I don't know where to go, O'Brien. I really don't.
All right, so take a look at this one. This is another one that'll open some eyes. Grading the Browns offense during the Week 9 loss to the Chargers. Browns offensive stats, 26 of 46. That's not bad. 235. A lot of that was in the second and some garbage time, including the touchdowns. 3 interceptions. The rushing stats even worse. 79 yards on 24 attempts, 3.3 yards a carry. Against light boxes because they were playing zone. Again, that comes back to the offensive line. Browns offensive game plan play calling, they give it a C. I'd give it a D. And the offensive execution is an F. It might not be even an F. It might be not applicable because they didn't execute at all.
I'm watching the game, and I'm just like, every time I thought I could get something out of it, I'm sitting in the stands, and I'm like, my mouth is just at the ground. I could not believe what I was seeing. It was almost like they didn't come out to play this week. It was as bad as it could get. And then the throws that Jameis was making, it just makes me mad that the Browns are the low-hanging fruit, and we continue to prove everyone right. Like, all this week you heard, well, Jameis is going to come back down to earth, and he'll throw some interceptions, and, oh, Nick Chubb's not going to be the running back that we saw, and here we are. Everything's unfolding in front of our eyes for the low-hanging fruit for these people to be right. So this is going to be an interesting 8 weeks moving forward because you're going to see what guys really want to move forward with this organization. And when you hear guys like David Njoku being thrown around in trade talks and Myles Garrett, where there's smoke, there's fire. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's something that we're going to have to be paying attention to and seeing how much effort these guys are given moving forward because, let's be honest, we're playing for draft right now.
Chef Zay and I are going to step aside, take one more time out, other side of the break, take a look at where this offense ranks, and then talk a little bit about trade deadline. Trade deadline coming up 4 o'clock tomorrow. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
You know what I think? I don't think you have the stones.
Oh, I've got the stones. I think you're the one that don't have the stones.
Let's settle this once and for all.
Amble up to the 4 new Ohio Lottery scratch-offs with all kinds of stones. Gemstones, diamond, emerald, sapphire, and ruby 10s. $10 each. 10 times multipliers. 2 fast spots for quick draw wins of up to $100 and a $500,000 grand prize. Which one will you get when you order them up? Well, that's just the luck of the draw.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE with Chef Xavier Crocker from the CrocPot podcast, also writer for CrocPotCLE.com. Take a look at this, Chef Zay. Jordan Schultz, NFL national reporter. Browns are receiving heavy interest on David Njoku. They remain highly unlikely to trade him. They view Njoku as part of the long-term future. So, again, I take those as indications they view this as more of a pivot, short-term rebuild rather than a full-on, take the engine out and drop the blocks and see what we got. So the fact that you're hearing those kind of things, like you said, where there's smoke, there's fire, people are picking up the phone and they're saying we're not trading Njoku is what we are hearing right now.
That scares me about that is every time you hear someone put their foot down and be like, oh, we're not doing this. Next thing you know, there's a notification saying David Njoku was traded for a second and third. You know what I mean? So that's the one thing that I'm scared about. But no, this is in no shape or form should the Browns tear the studs out. And that's what I don't understand. You have Grant Delpit under contract. You have Myles Garrett under contract. You have Denzel Ward under contract. Injuries, that's another story. You have David Njoku under contract. You have a lot of your key guys under contract for the next few years. And then the most important things that you need in order to win is a defensive line, a edge rusher, and a solid corner, which you have two of those. And then on the other side, offensive left tackle, right tackle, and a quarterback, which the Browns are in search for now with a quarterback. So I don't get this notion that, oh, let's trade Myles Garrett for 3 first-rounders and this, and let's get rid of David Njoku and collect all these assets. It's funny to me how all of a sudden these picks aren't relevant. Like there was a war with the Deshaun Watson thing with the picks, and now there's another war with the picks in terms of Myles Garrett. It's just funny how it's all coming full circle, and now picks matter and they don't matter. Have you seen it as well?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and again, I think the key question is, do you view it as a short-term rebuild? In other words, can you find a way to get back to the playoffs next year? If you do, I don't even know if you trade Zadarius Smith at that point. You certainly need a wide receiver, you need a quarterback, you need a tackle, be it right or left. You need those 3 things. Can you get 3 guys that can start in free agency and the draft? And you're going to be hamstrung because that contract to Deshaun Watson still on the books. If you think you can get those 3 things via free agency, and then you're right there again as a playoff team.
And you talk about the money aspect. That's the one reason why I don't think Andrew Berry is going to get canned this year. He put us in this hell cap crisis. And he's going to be the one to get us out of it. You don't have a better guy to fix money and to move money and to make money appear out of thin air than Andrew Berry, regardless of how you feel of what he does in his draft or free agency or whatever the case may be. I think that's where they need to bring in a better, in the terms of John Dorsey, a better football guy to help with the football operations. But I definitely think that this is, it's the same exact roster as last year. How are we this bad? That's why I don't think it's a talent issue. It's not. This is a culture issue, which is weird because the culture was great last year when we were winning. So no big rebuild. Pump the brakes. Let's just soft rebuild.
I think it's culture and scheme. I don't. Whatever you were trying to do, it didn't work. Don't do that again because it didn't work. Who are some of the guys that you'd listen to? I would listen, if anybody wants to give me a 3rd-round pick for Jed Wills, I'd do that in a hurry. I don't think anybody will. Greg Newsome I'd listen on because I think they identify cornerbacks really well. You're going to need some money cap-wise that you can roll over. And that, his 5th-year option's 13-something million. You already got 20-some million with Ward, and you're going to have to give Martin Emerson another contract. Mm-hmm. So I would listen on him. But again, if you think you can pivot and be competitive again next year, I see why you wouldn't.
Newsome is the one that hurts me the most because I got a soft spot for Newsome. I really enjoy his game. I think he gets a lot of flack. He reminds me of a better version of Buster Screen. There isn't a play that Greg Newsome isn't giving 110%, no matter if he's getting burnt or not. But, knowing he's on this 5th-year option, if someone picks up the phone and say, hey, we got a 2nd or a 3rd for Newsome, I don't think Andrew Berry's going to turn that down. If Zadarius is drawing a 2nd or 3rd round pick, I don't think Andrew Berry's going to turn that down. You got Shelby Harris, who's on a 1-year deal. You got Mo Hurst, who's on a 1-year deal. You got a lot of guys who are on these 1-year deals or contract years. And I think that would be the direction that they go as far as if they were to trade anybody, because we'll be looking for the replacements next year. This was the biggest year, in my opinion, for this organization. And I think how they handle it is going to, dictate for the next 5 years what direction they're going to go. And that's the players that they retain or bring back and that sort. But I think the thing that scares me the most is at one point you had players willing to take less money. You had players willing to come to Cleveland because of the opportunity that we had. And with the season that we just had unfold upon us, I don't know if you have that anymore. So I don't know where Andrew Berry's going with this. That's why I think you need to go out and get that football mind here to help aid him in the decisions.
Xavier, Crocker, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Brian, let me know the flight dates for Cancun because I know we're on our way.
Sounds good. Have a good one. Chef Zay, make sure you check him out. The CrocPot podcast, also writes for CrocPotCLE.com. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.